Hey Finxters! Now this is a very interesting interview question wherein we will be discussing how to find the longest common prefix from a given array of strings. So without further delay, let us try and understand what is the longest common prefix. Now as you can see, this is the given question to you and it's quite obvious that you have to find the longest common prefix, and in case there is no common prefix, then you have to return an empty string. So that's it about the problem statement. Now let's go ahead and try and understand what is longest common prefix. So the longest common prefix for an array of strings is the common prefix between two dissimilar strings. Now what does that mean? Let's try and understand that with the help of few examples. Let's say that the given array of strings consists of the following strings: flower, flow, and flight. Now, what's the longest common prefix in this case? Now, longest common prefix means you have to consider all the three strings such that the prefix in each string has to be common. For example, let's have a look at flower. If you consider the characters F and L, that is also present in the next string flow, while FNL is also the prefix for the string flight. Now you might be wondering, why not FLO? Now the reason to this is, though FLO is present in the second string, however in the third string, as you can see, that it is FLI. Therefore, FLO is not the common substring in all the cases. That is, you have to consider all the strings in the given array. Therefore, in this case, FL is the longest common prefix. Now let's have a look at another example. Let's say that the strings in the array are dog, race car, and car. Now if you look closely, then these strings have no common prefix. In this case, the output should be an empty string. Similarly, let's have a look at the third example. The only common character or the only common prefix in this case is A, or the character A. Therefore, we return A as the output. Now you might be wondering that both these strings have the prefix APP. However, uppercase letters are not considered to be the same. Therefore, the output is A. This means that this question considers that the strings are case sensitive. Now let's have a look at another example. Here we have only one string, and in that case you have to return the entire string because that's the prefix in this case. So I hope now you have an idea about the longest common prefix. So let's go ahead and try to solve this question in the best way possible. The best way to understand and solve a problem is to break it down with the help of an example. So we are going to dive into an example to try and understand the approach that we will be using. So let's say that these are the three strings that are given to you. That is Finxter, Fin, and Finland. Now before you dive into the program, it is quite evident that Fin in the first string, while the second string is Fin itself, and in the third string as well, Fin is the longest common prefix string. So how are we going to tell Python to deduce this output? To do that, you can simply go ahead and extract the individual characters at the start of each string. By that, I mean that you have to extract F from the first string, F from the second string, while F from the third string as well, and then store them in a tuple. Similarly, you can once again go ahead and then extract I from the first string, I from the second string, and I from the third string. And finally, you go ahead and extract N from the first string, N from the second string, and N from the third string. Now, how long do we do this? To understand that, let's have a look at how this algorithm works. So as I said, we will be extracting F from the first, second, and third strings and store them in a tuple. So this right here can be considered to be a tuple. Then we go ahead and extract I from all the strings and once again store them in another tuple. And then finally we go ahead and extract N from all the strings and then store them in another tuple. Now, how long do we do this? We can do this with the help of the set method. Now, I hope you know that a set is a data structure in Python which cannot have duplicate elements. So, if we convert this tuple into a set, then that set will contain only one character, which is f. Similarly, if we extract or if we convert this tuple to a set, then the set will contain only one character, which is I. Similarly, in the third case, if you convert this tuple into a set, it will contain a single character, which is n. Now, what you can do is, as soon as the set contains more than one character, you can immediately break out of the loop and you can say that we have reached our final output, which is the longest common prefix string, and then return it. Now, what do I mean? To understand that, let's go back and let's have a look at a different example, because in this example, you'll not understand it in the proper way. So let's consider the first example. As soon as we move on to the third character in each string, we find that the tuple consists of the characters O from the first string, O from the second string, and I from the third string. So the tuple now looks something like O, O, and I. So now when you convert that tuple into a set, then the set will consist of the characters O and I. Since O and O from the first two strings are common, so the set will consist of the character O only once. However, I is also present only once in the tuple, so the set will also contain the character I. Therefore, in that case, we can safely say that we will not include the third character from each string. Hence, the first two characters are the longest common prefix string. So that is exactly what happens in this case as well. We simply go ahead and convert all these tuples into a set, and then we say that all the characters present in the set form the longest common prefix. So I hope you understood that how this algorithm is going to work. And now, before you dive into the solution, you have to understand what is the zip method in Python. Therefore, please take some time and try to understand the zip method. And I'm quite sure that it will also help you in solving other problems as well. So here's an amazing explanation on the zip method. Please understand the zip method properly, and then we will continue with our algorithm.
Hey Fixters, and welcome to today's tutorial. I'm excited to show you how the zip and unzip methods work in Python. So you may already have seen the zip function. So it's a Python built-in function, which you can see it's highlighted in my editor, for example, with blue, indicating that it's a Python built-in function. So you don't have to import anything, but you can just use it out of the box. So with any Python editor, with any Python Python installation, basically. So the general idea is, so before we dive in the zip function, I want to motivate it a bit and give you a general conceptual idea. Because the zip function is used by Python coders, especially by advanced Python coders. So if the Python coder becomes more and more proficient with the use of the Python programming language, he will use more and more the zip function, basically. I have observed many professional developers using the zip function everywhere they can. And the beginner developer, he doesn't really grasp the meaning of the zip function. He's not confident in its use, so he won't use the zip function. He will find other ways of writing the same thing in a few lines of code. Yeah, but the zip function, if you like, as any concept in coding, if you really understand the meaning, it's highly effective to use it, and you will use it more and more in practice. You will write more condensed, more efficient code that is also easier to understand for more advanced coders. So, but let's maybe start with a few conceptual ideas. So say you have these two lists. This is I just write in my Python shell to show you the concepts first, without, I mean, don't even bother that this is basically that I just have list objects and I don't store them in variables or so. So say you have two lists and you want to zip them together, then you obtain if you zip them together, so if you use those as arguments to the zip function, then you obtain this list of tuples. And I give you the tuples first, and then you can try to figure out what exactly does the zip function do. Okay, so here we have two lists. This is given, and the zip function zips together those two lists. Okay, so what does it mean? It basically adds groups together the first elements of the list in a new tuple, and then it groups together the second elements of the list in a new tuple, yeah, in this second tuple, and then it groups together the third elements of the list in a new tuple. So basically, it groups together the ith elements of the list you use in the zip function to a tuple value, and you can even add more lists. For example, here, say we have another list 7, 8, 9. So if you use them as a zip function, then it will just add the third value to the tuples. Okay, tuples. So it basically 7, 8, 9. So it basically will simply group together the ith element of all the iterables that are passed into the zip function. Okay, so this is what the zip function does. And so you have two lists with some elements on the lines, and you simply group together the elements in the tuples of the different lists. So you get a list of tuples as a result of the of using the zip function. So let's have a practical example. Say we have two lists. Say we call this one list 1, and this one we call list 2. And now, just for maybe later use, we call this one list 3. So we have three lists, and we now we uncomment this one, and now we have a variable zipped, and in the variable we store the result of applying the zip function to list 1 and list 2. Okay, and we convert this to a list because the zip function will return a zip object, and the zip object is basically maybe let's have a look at the zip object first. So if you print the zip object, yeah, it gives you an iterator. Okay, so the zip object is an iterable. You see it doesn't give you any information, but you can do something like this. So you can iterate over a zip object. For tuple in zipped, print, let's not call it tuple because tuple is already a reserved name. So if you do this, so we can iterate over the zip object, and this just gives us the tuples. Okay, so the zip object is a more efficient data structure to iterate over than a list, because a list it needs to reserve the whole memory at the beginning of the list creation process. So it creates a list, and then the whole memory is already reserved. But an iterator, it can dynamically create new the next element. Yeah, it just creates the next element and the next element and the next element, so you can iterate over all elements in a given data structure. Okay, and you can easily convert an iterator to a list by simply calling the list constructor, okay, which is also a built-in function. And this way, now you see what was previously an iterator is now a list, and it contains the element 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, 6. So it basically simply groups together the first elements of the two lists, the second elements of the two lists, and the third elements of the two lists. Okay, so this is what the zip function does essentially. So far so good. It's quite simple to understand, and now you can even pass the third list. For example, you can pass an arbitrary number of lists, and then it will just zip together an arbitrary number of lists. And you can see here that we have now tuples with 3 values instead of 2 values because we have passed 3 lists. Okay, and it will just it will just add together the ith element of all the lists you pass into the zip function. Good. So this is like the first part, how to zip something. But now the next. So what if you want to unzip something? So given this zipped object, so let's store it maybe in a. So let's go back to the example with 2 lists. We remove 1 list here, and this is the result of our zipped object. So how can we basically unzip this? So how can we get the 2 lists again from a zipped object? So doing the reverse or inverse operation, and you can do this basically by, let's call it L1 and L2. creating new variables. So we have two lists and we use the following simple call, zip. So again, we use the zip function to unzip the original elements. And this is difficult to grasp for many people. Well, how does the zip function, what is the reverse of the zip function basically? But think about it. If you again group together the first element of your tuple of your first tuple and the first element of your second tuple and the first element of your third tuple, then this is the original list 1. This is the original list. And now if you take the second element of your first tuple, the second element of the second tuple, and the second element of the third tuple, this is again your second input list. And if you have like 5 tuple values because you had 5 input lists, then you will obtain 5 output lists, 5 unzipped lists. And therefore we simply pass our original list of tuples, and we use this small asterisk operator, which is the unpacking operator. So it unpacks all values in the list, all tuples, and removing the outer list, basically. Yeah? It removes this outer, because you remember the zip function takes an arbitrary number of iterables. And as I already said, in words, we want to group together the first elements of all these tuples and the second elements of all these tuples and so on, yeah. And but we cannot simply pass a list of something. If you pass a list of something, then it will just take this list as a whole, as one iterable. But we want to have this one, we want to use basically only the tuples as an iterable. So we want to get rid of the outer list. And we can get rid of the outer list by using this unpacking operator, okay? So this is how it works. So we unpack all tuples into the zip function, and the tuple is an iterable. You can iterate over all values in the tuple. So now we have 3 tuples or 3 iterables as input to the zip function. And now it will simply zip together the first elements of these iterables and the second values of these iterables and so on. It will unpack, it will create the original or recreate the original list. So if you print L1 and print L2, we will see the original list, yeah? These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is how you can, to summarize, you can zip 2 lists together. So zip the ith element or pack the ith element into a new tuple from a given list of from a given number of iterables, which you simply pass into the zip function. So the zip function groups together the ith element of these iterables, and you can unzip this by simply unpacking the result into another zip function call. Okay, so this is like you can do the one operation the one way, and then the other way the inverse operation by using the same function with a slight modification. It's just this unpacking operator. Okay, thanks for listening to this video. If you have any questions, then feel free to ask the questions below, and see you in the next video. Bye.
Okay, now I hope you have a clear idea about the zip method. So let's go ahead and solve our question now. Now this is the function that accepts the array of strings. And before we dive into the for loop and use our zip method, we have to take care of 2 cases. The first case is when the array is empty. In that case, you have to return an empty string. So we simply go ahead and take care of that case by checking if the array is empty or not. And then we return an empty string. And then we have the second case. Here we have to check if the length of the array is 1. And what does that mean? That means that the array only consists of a single string. And in that case, we simply go ahead and return the only string that the array consists. Now, how do we check that? We check that with the help of the len method, which helps us to find number of strings in the array. For example, if the array consists of only 1 string like this, let's say that the only string in the array is Finxter, then in that case, Python will execute this if statement and it will return Finxter as the output. Okay, now we have safely taken care of these cases, and now it's time to dive into the solution. To solve this problem, we need the help of a variable which goes by the name temp, and this variable will help us to keep account of the longest common prefix string in the given array of strings. And then the real task begins. We use a for loop which will help us to iterate over all the strings in the given array. So let's say that this is the given array, and the for loop will help us to iterate over each string in this array such that in every iteration we can extract a character from each string. And the zip method comes to our rescue when we want to do this. Since you already went through the previous explanation of the zip method, so I hope you understand that when we use the zip method on this array, it will first extract f from each string and then store them in a tuple. Then it will extract I from each string within the array and then store them in another tuple and so on. Then we move inside the for loop and we immediately convert the tuple that was extracted into a set. While explaining you the algorithm, I mentioned why we are converting it into a set, and that is exactly what we are doing in this case. And then what was the condition that would help us to understand if we have reached the final output? Yes, it was to check if the length of the set was greater than 1. If the length of the set is greater than 1, then we break out of the loop and we return the output. However, if the length of the set is not greater than 1 in a particular iteration, in that case, we move inside the else block and we update the temp variable. And what does the temp variable store? The temp variable stores each character within the set. That is, we club or we combine each character in the set and store it in the variable temp. Thus, temp in this case is a string which stores the output, that is the longest common prefix string. Now, in order to understand and visualize this better, let us take the help of a few print statements which will make the output quite clear. So let's say, or let's print a tuple which is chr. Now, when we move inside the else block, let's go ahead and print a string temp. Now, as you know that temp helps us to store the output, and we go ahead and club each and every character present in the set chr in every iteration within the temp variable until and unless we reach the final output. Finally, let's also use another print statement before we end the loop so that we can distinguish between each iteration. And now let's finally go ahead and return temp. Now, to understand this output, let's use the same example that we went through in our presentation. Let's find out what happens. So let's execute this code, and there we go. In the first iteration, the tuple stores the character f from each string within the given array, and the variable temp stores the character in the given set, which is f. Also, to make things more clear, let's also go ahead and print the set itself. So let's say set equals, and then let's convert the tuple into a set as we did in this case, and then we check the length of the character or the length of the tuple. So let's also go ahead and before we move inside the if else blocks, let's also print the length of the set. This will help you to visualize the output. Okay, let's go ahead and execute this code again. And there we go. So as you can see, in the first iteration, the tuple consists of the character f from each string of the given array. Now, when we convert this tuple into a set, the set only consists of the character f. Hence, the length of the set is 1 and the variable temp stores the character f. Since the length of the set is 1, we can safely move on to the next iteration, which now stores the character I from each string in the given array. As you can see, the second character is I in each string. And now when we go ahead and convert this tuple into a set, it once again consists of only one character, which is I. And now we update the temp variable such that it consists of the characters f and I. Finally, we move on to the third iteration, wherein the tuple consists of letter or the character n from each string of the given array. Then we again go ahead and convert it into a set, and the set now once again consists of the character n. So the length of the set is once again 1. Hence, temp gets updated with the characters f, I, and n. But now, after storing n in the variable temp, when Python reaches the fourth character, which is x in the first string, L in the third string, and nothing in the case of the second string, it comes out of the loop and simply returns the value stored within the temp variable. which is the string or the prefix fin. And this happens to be the longest common prefix in this example. So now I hope with the help of these print statements, you understood how the algorithm works and how you can use the zip and the set methods to solve this problem. Now let's also go ahead and execute this code on a few other examples or test cases to find out if this works on all the cases. And then we can safely say that yes, we can use this algorithm in our interview to reach the final output. So the test cases are as follows. And let's execute this code once again. And there we go. So in the first case, the output expected is FL, and that's the output that we got. In the second case, the output expected is an empty string, and that's what we got. In the third case, the output expected is AAB, and that's what we got. In the fourth case, it should be A, and A is what we got. And finally, the output should be Finxter, which is exactly what we got. So this code works perfectly fine, and you can definitely use it in your interview. So that's it for this interview question. If you have any doubts, please mention them in the comments below, and I'll try to answer all your doubts. Okay, goodbye for now. Let's meet in another video lecture wherein we will be solving another interview question.